Hello and
Hello.
welcome. Welcome to our book club. This is the first chapter, I guess, in our book club for our second book, The Emotionally Healthy Leader. We've been reading it over this month. It's split into two parts, and we've read part one this month. And I have to say, we read Gardens last time, and now we're reading this. And this is probably one of the most challenging books me and Becky have ever read. I think I've actually messaged Becky saying this book is killing me on an occasion, which I think she slightly wondered what I meant. But basically, it's pretty challenging. And the premise of this book is basically looking at how we can come before God and just with being rather than doing. How can we be with him rather than just doing things for him? And I guess for us, we both work in ministry roles in the sense that we work for Onelife. So actually, it's even harder, I think, to not make your work, your relationship with God as well. And so for us, it's been really challenging. But yeah, we've just been reading part one of the book. And Becky, do you want to tell us a bit about part one?
Yeah, absolutely. So part one, the kind of headline title of whole of part one is called Focus on the Inner Life. So it has four main sections, or five. And the first one is it goes to the emotionally unhealthy leader, a chapter which literally is unbelievably like, oh, is that me? Am I more emotionally unhealthy than I realised? Then we face your shadow. You leading out of your marriage / out of your singleness. Slowing down for loving union and practicing Sabbath delight. And as Helen said, like this we are literally not paid to say this by Peter Scazzero or anything, but this book, honestly, every single chapter we like meet up on Zoom and we discuss like, how we found it. There has just been so many challenges, so it doesn't come out without a hazard warning that you're going to be challenged, but in a really lovely way of like, I'm challenged because genuinely I want to know Jesus more and I want to live and lead for him more. There are so many things we could talk about, but for the sake of time, we're literally going for one each. So Helen, what is the one thing you are loving out of this book so far?
Chapter 4 is called Slowing Down for Loving Union, which I have to say I don't think is a great chapter. I think it sells it slightly short. But this chapter actually begins with a story of a church pastor called Larry. And Larry seems to be doing a great job. He's got a beautiful family, lovely wife and children. The church is flourishing. They're getting new members every week. And the Holy Spirit is moving and people are coming to see what's happening. And then it turns out that Larry has been having an affair for the past year or so. It turns out that he's embezzled money. It turns out that actually loads of stuff has gone on that would make you question his character, but no one's realised because actually results have still been happening in the sense that people have been coming and God's been moving. And actually, it just comes with this real warning of the fact that just because things look good on the outside doesn't mean that they're okay on the inside. And this idea about slowing down for loving union is literally slowing down long enough, often enough, to be with Jesus and to allow him to speak into every area of your life, not just the couple of areas that you want him to move in that day, but actually, you know what, look at all of me, see all of me, and do what you will. So that's kind of what the chapter is all about. And he talks around quiet times as well. He talked specifically, he gave an example of someone who kind of is doing their quiet time on a train, and he gives two scenarios. He says one of them is they just read through a devotional that they found in like a free pamphlet. That's their quiet time, they've ticked it off. The other scenario is that the same person, but they get out their Bible, they read stuff, they sit and reflect on it, and they pray and ask Jesus to meet with them. And while both of those would count as a quiet time, actually one of them is really trying to meet with the living God, and one of them is ticking it off. And I think I felt slightly challenged. I have a Bible reading plan. I use, I forgot what it's called. It's the Bible Project reading plan, whatever that is. Read scripture, there we go. It's brilliant. But it's very easy for me to just be like, great, I need to tick off the next one. Great, I need to tick off the next one. Without actually slowing down and asking Jesus to speak to me during those times. And at the moment, I'm reading through Jeremiah, which is pretty dry at the moment, I'm finding. I mean, there are lots of profound things in there. But there's only so much I can read about that without kind of thinking, okay, Jesus, please actually speak to me about this. And so what I've been doing every day in response to this chapter has been setting a timer for 10 minutes during my quiet time and literally just being still and silence and asking Jesus to meet with me, and just trying to put every other thought out of my head, and just asking him to meet with me in that space. And I found in this season especially, that's been really important, because I'm spending a lot of time by myself, but I'm not necessarily spending much time in silence or just being still, particularly by myself. So that's been a real challenge for me. And then just really quickly, I'm kind of saying two things. Another part of this chapter is talks about having a rule of life, which is kind of a phrase you might have heard thrown around, and I definitely have. But he kind of gives a really clear structure of how to make one. And he talks about 4 areas. This is the little page. So it's a really practical book as well. There are kind of activities in every section, and little surveys as well, if you like a little survey. And so it's about 4 areas: prayer, rest, relationships, and work. And he basically says that in each season, the idea is that you just put down your non-negotiables for that season. So what are your non-negotiables in the areas of rest, relationships, prayer, and work? And so just to give you an example, I've done a really short one. Becky's done a very comprehensive one, because she's very diligent compared to me. But actually mine, and this is literally for this season, what I need. So my prayer ones are having a weekly Sabbath. I know, look at that compared to my little thing.
Love the highlighters, come on.
She's so organised. I've got my weekly Sabbath in this season. That is so important for me, because the days can just all merge into one, can't they? And then I've got my 10 minutes of silence. So those are my kind of 2 things for prayer. My rest, so I've got exercising 6 out of 7 days of the week, getting out there, being outside, getting some fresh air, and getting my heart rate up, because I need those endorphins. And then the second thing is limiting social media to 30 minutes a day. I've put the little cap. Well, I was saying to Becky, I've put the little cap thing on my phone. And this morning, I think by about 10 o'clock, I'd already used it up. And so I think I've pressed to give me 15 more minutes about 4 times already today. And I slightly regret the fact that this is going out on the internet. So anyone can ask me about that, please do. With my relationships, I've put down having weekly Zooms with both mine and Richard's family. So having those in every week. And then also date night. Because you would think like we spend every evening together, which we do, but we mostly sit at the moment sitting in front of the TV, eating next to each other rather than eating with each other. So actually putting that in has been really important. And then finally, for work, the 2 things I put are just being present in team meetings. It's so easy when you're behind a screen to not really bring your full self. It's very easy to kind of slide in, for me to be eating my breakfast, sitting in team meeting. And then the second thing is scheduling in reading time. And that is mostly because I've just felt between reading this book and reading Celebration of Discipline, which we're also tracking with, it's just been so profound. To get to read into the area that we're teaching on so often. And I just really feel like God's been speaking to me through other people. So that's kind of my rule for life. So it's not one rule, which I found confusing at first, but it's basically just thinking, what are your non-negotiables in these areas? And those are mine for this season. It's a great activity if you want to go through it yourself. Becky, what have you been doing?
No, I was just reflecting when we both journeyed through this idea of making our rule of life, and it is so practical to actually stop and think about it. I think so often when you're reading through a book or something, you can so easily read the theory or the abstract, oh lovely, but actually when you stop and you make it your own, it's so it's like, oh, okay, I'm owning this properly. And the other thing that she said I thought was just, again, even as you said it, having read the chapter, I was like, oh gosh, it's just, again, not being caught up in being impressed by leaders and being wowed by how great they are, but actually our call is to be wowed by God, and like we can only do that by slowing down, literally spending time with him. Trying to do again. But so for me that's Helen's key one, which is still very much key for me. But the second chapter, which again has a little bit of a rogue title. All the titles and like headings of this book sometimes are like, oh lovely. It's called Facing Your Shadow, which sounds very dramatic, very like almost a bit like, I don't know, from some weird sci-fi movie, but it's not. It's just the idea of your shadow side being this, I even wrote down the definition because I knew I'd forget in the moment, being the shadow side is an accumulation of untamed emotions, less than pure motives, thoughts that, while largely being unconscious, actually strongly influence and shape your behaviours. And that sounds unbelievably like, oh my goodness, something deeply wrong with me. But just in the sense that, we are fallen human beings who are trying to journey toward God, but absolutely does sin still creep into our lives. But so just facing that rather than having that like British culture of sweeping it aside, and just standing firm and carrying on because we carry on. And I think one of the practical tools, like there's practical tools in each chapter to just, you know, engage with it. And I think the one this for this chapter was actually engaging with your emotions, not just letting them slide past. Oh, okay, yeah, okay, I felt really angry, upset in that moment. As actually engaging with them and being like, okay, so that's how I'm feeling now. This is why. Okay, that, like rationalizing it rather than brushing it away, just being like, oh, you know, because obviously we don't want to base our faith on our emotions. They're absolutely still things we have to like engage with. It's been a real journey for me going through this. I think my family background is probably like a lot of yours. We wouldn't have really talked about our emotions or our feelings ever. I think probably my parents and their parents' generation would be very much of the stiff upper lip British culture is we oh no, we don't engage with that. We just you know, get on with it because oh that's silly. But actually, you know, this chapter has just really challenged me to engage with that. So then I catch myself less recently like reacting irrationally. Oh my goodness, the words today. Irrationally, like to something. And yeah, I found it really helpful, really challenging. I don't know how you found this, Helen, this facing this.
Yeah, I think yeah, we actually had a conversation after this, both reading this chapter and just saying, okay, the next time you feel like annoyed or angry or something, okay, we have to stop and think, okay, why do I feel like this? And I think for me, I'm probably more emotional than Becky. I'm that person that cries at everything. Classic. But I think for me, it's been taking those moments and being like, when I've been frustrated by something, I won't give too many examples because we've been in lockdown, so it's only been me and Rich in the house. I've been annoyed with someone, which has been my issue. And I've stopped and tried to work out what that is. Almost always it's a need for control of something. So it's like, oh, the kitchen isn't tidy and actually I feel out of control, or it's someone hasn't done exactly what I wanted them to do. They haven't been under my control. I think it's actually just realising that and not being so consumed by emotion to be able to realise what's really going on in me, and actually that need for control, and actually being able to go a bit deeper with that. And I guess we had an interesting conversation as well, Becky, I hope you don't mind me saying, because I think when it was the challenge of saying, you know, actually sit down and think about your feelings, and if you, like you're saying, your family aren't necessarily into that, and it's almost like this thing that we have of not wanting to be navel gazing and actually being like, oh, but if I look at my emotions, I'll just get sucked in. And I guess, what's your journey been with that? Because I'm assuming you haven't found that, you haven't become a different person.
Oh no. Absolutely, because I think, you know, at times we probably will realise that, you know, if we dwell on, you know, those moments where we felt really sad and maybe there was a really genuine reason of feeling sad in that moment, my worry was if I was going to be doing this too regularly, that, as Helen said, I'd end up being like, oh, I feel even more sad now, not like I haven't rationalised it at all. Actually, it's just been so much deeper than that. I think the moment of pausing and being like, oh, okay, this is why I've reacted like that, this is why I'm feeling this, okay, this is where this comes from, has been actually being as cliche as it sounds, just being like, oh, okay, Lord, this is how I feel, this is, you know, this is me, this is the whole of me, and I want to give it to you. And there's this quote which started off this chapter, which I think sums it all up, a lot of this book, but particularly on addressing your shadow side, addressing the side of yourself which you probably don't post on social media, which is like the first and the most difficult task we face as leaders is to lead ourselves. I'm just going to read that again because that is flipping hard hitting. Is the first and the most difficult task we face as leaders is to lead ourselves. So I couldn't recommend you engaging more with trying to lead yourselves and actually dealing with all of yourselves, not just the beautiful, well-presented selves you put out there to the world, but all of it. Right.
Definitely. And I think, like, the thing to add to that is, like, it's not just recognizing and working in the moment, it's saying, actually, Jesus, with your presence, transform this area. And as we open ourselves up more, we invite more of his transforming presence. Because I guess I always think with, like, these kind of books, I think, like, oh, emotional health, it's going to be a bit like secular in the sense of like, oh, I'm going to think about my emotions and deal with them in kind of a distant way. But actually, it's his whole thing is meeting with Jesus, is inviting Jesus into that space, and from the place of meeting with Jesus in the vulnerable place, that's where we find emotional health. It's not separate. We don't separate our faith from our emotional health, which I've just loved. Like Becky said, we just couldn't recommend this book anymore. Like, thank you for choosing it. If you voted on the poll.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and we would so love to hear how you guys are getting on with it. So please comment below, send us a message or email, whatever you want to do. Emotional health leader. There we are. So chapter 1 was all about the inner life. Chapter 1, part 1 all about the inner life, and we are moving on to the next month, looking at part 2, which is all about the outer life. And I think it's just so strategic in how we started the inner life, that of course first we need to start with ourselves and with Jesus, and the being, not the doing. So it'd be really interesting moving into doing, having journeyed through some of that stuff. So yeah,
great. And hope you guys are all doing well, and looking forward to reading your comments below. Lots of love.
bye.